From CGTN headquarters in Beijing, this is The Hub with Wang Guan.
Hello and welcome to The Hub. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. When there is a war in Europe, its ripples are felt far and wide and in more ways than one. Last year, we faced a global energy crisis. This time, with the Russian oil and gas supplies in doubt, are we going the same way again? Or will we help switch faster to clean energy? And as good neighbors, how can China and ASEAN work together on a green transition? For more on this, we're joined from Jakarta, Indonesia by Fabby Tumiwa, Energy Transition Strategist and Executive Director of the Institute for Essential Services Reform. We also have with us at this hour Sara Jane Ahmed, Advisor to the Vulnerable 20 Group of Finance Ministers and founder of the Financial Future Center in Manila, the Philippines. Welcome everyone to The Hub on CGTN. Let's talk about this energy crisis we are facing right now. If I can go to you, Ms. Ahmed, let's take a quick look at the region's energy landscape. How do you think the Ukraine crisis has affected the ASEAN energy-wise, and what will happen if the crisis continues?
So increasingly volatile and expensive fossil fuels that are unreliable to power our economies. And even prior to the pandemic, ASEAN was on track to have a deficit in payments for energy trade for over $300 billion per year towards 2040. And I think with COVID-19 and its aftermath on lives, livelihoods, and economies, it continues to be an ongoing concern. And as climate vulnerable economies struggle to stabilize, a jumpstart recovery is not possible with unpredictable fossil fuel prices. Rather, renewables is better placed to fuel the economy, providing the long-term economic and financial stability. And the question here is there a role for China in this setting? And the answer is most definitely yes. The more important question, however, is if China is ready to take the lead rather than observe from the sidelines. Is China ready to make this historic choice?
And can you give us an example regarding the vulnerability of some of the economies that you have been advising and working with? How has the Ukraine crisis worsened their situation? Ms. Ahmed?
So a lot of the climate vulnerable economies actually import their fossil fuels, which means they are totally exposed to the volatility. They're also exposed to not just high fuel prices, but higher food prices. Which impacts livelihoods and has knock-on effects on the entire economy.
All right, Mr. Tumiwa, do you see the sanctions on Russian oil and gas speeding up the global green energy transition, or could they mean a huge setback for the global economy?
Well, I see that the impact of the sanction of oil and gas from Russia is actually we see there's a speed up of the implementation of renewable energy in Europe because they would like to switch and from natural gas and reduce the natural gas dependency. We see that as EU respond to these situations by increasing budget to accelerate the development of renewable energy. We see that talk about green hydrogen now become viable, strengthen the energy efficiencies measures as well as electric vehicles. So that's kind of the measure that we see that EU countries trying to reduce dependencies or reliance on from natural gas. But in terms of the impact, I think we will see that later on. I think once EU has set that trend, I think there will be spillover effect, I think, to the other country.
Okay, let's talk about an unpleasant fact that is. Sorry, sir. Let's talk about this unpleasant fact that is the transitioning off fossil fuel and into greener energy sources. We've been discussing clean energy plans and signing of agreements for many years, right? There is this COP26, the Paris Agreement, the Kyoto Protocol, you name it. But we still have shortfalls in funding, in action, and in the political will. So, in your opinion, how can this shortfall be met?
Well, that's true. Energy transition requires large scale of financing, in particular in the G20 countries. That responsible for 80% of global emission. So if you would like to make energy transition align with the Paris Agreement goal, that for sure a lot of infrastructure energy infrastructure modernizations in emerging economy, including in Indonesia, my country has to speed up, and I think it's require a large scale of financing. In Indonesia alone, our study shows that from now until 2030, it requires between 25 to 35 billion dollars annually in investment in energy infrastructure toward net zero emission by 2050. So this as EU country that mostly will support the financing for the energy transition in many emerging economy, the current situations also could be could affect the speed and the scale of financing to support the energy of the energy transition.
Sure, Ms. Ahmed, I want to go to you, if you don't mind. You co-authored an article which is gaining traction on the internet. It says several thought-provoking things. For example, you said China and ASEAN need chopstick and broom spirit to fight climate change. How to understand this riddle?
So this is about partnership. It's about keeping together, keeping on track. And this is where the opportunity between China and ASEAN occurs. So one is on technology. China's manufacturing capacity in solar, wind, power grids, and battery storage means that the energy transition is affordable in Southeast Asia. The State Grid Corporation of China, China's Southern Power Grid, have built the most modernized grids and continue to do so throughout Southeast Asia. Another point is that the China policy banks, China Development Bank, China Export-Import Bank, China Agriculture Development Bank, they can support these innovative business models and they can help prepare projects and they can thus provide the resources to improve bankability. And we know this has been a key constraint for many of the Chinese banks. China is also home to the top 4 largest banks in the world. Imagine the financial strength that could underpin the growth of the ASEAN. And lastly, political will. China appears willing and ready to take a leadership role, and other developing countries, or with other developing countries, as demonstrated in Marrakesh back in 2016. And in recent years, their announcement about 2030 and 2060 targets, the emissions peak and the neutrality target, respectively.
You know, let's talk about ASEAN specifically. We know that not all the economies of ASEAN are at the same level, nor are they growing at the same speed. You have Singapore on one hand, which is a grown and developed economy, but also, with all due respect, you have Myanmar, right, who's facing political instability, fighting political instability at home. Are all ASEAN countries on the same page? How can they, transition off fossil fuel? Are we going to see phased transition? What is your opinion?
So the different phases means different types of opportunities. So when it comes to the more lesser developed, let's say ASEAN states, this is a question of energy access. And so then you would be looking at modular, smaller system sizes, but still quite a large market share. When it comes to the larger, more developed, let's say ASEAN economies, you'd be looking at energy efficiency, grid upgrades, battery storage. There are various technologies and opportunities that China can provide the different ASEAN circumstances.
Right. If climate change and global warming have taught us anything, that is energy transition is no longer an option but a necessity. Mr. Tumiwa, same question to you. Do all 10 members of the ASEAN feel the same way?
I think I do agree with Ms. Ahmed's assessment that although the development level is vary between ASEAN country, but it's give a different opportunities. The good thing with that with the ASEAN member countries that is the different level of development, but we all have renewable energy resources. It means that we can utilize that to support our growing economy. For a country like Indonesia, we have rapid energy demand, but the other country also, we see that the energy demand growth quite slowly. So it's a different technology for different segments. Yeah, we also when it comes to energy transition, for instance, in Indonesia, we need to decarbonize our industry as well, and that's require a different set of technology. While maybe country like Myanmar has a different priorities because they're still struggling to increase the quality energy access. So a different technology, but what we see is that this is a Chinese could actually provide that technology. We know at China also produce technology to support the decarbonizing the industry. As we see in Indonesia, there's a number of Chinese investment in smelter, for instance, and those companies willing to greening their supply chain. They would like to greening their electricity. They would like to install renewable, but also use efficient technology to process the ore, for instance. So we see that I think every country have their own priorities, and I think it's also give a lot of opportunity for cooperation with China manufacturer and technology provider.
You know, both of you have worked, have advised so many companies in the field of green energy and energy transition. Can you perhaps share with our audience some best practices you've seen over the years in a given country or region? Why don't I start with you, Ms. Ahmed?
Thank you. This is a really good question. I think one key point here is four things actually that I've seen. One is the partnership when creating innovative business models, because this partnership enables the technology transfer. And we already see China, being the largest solar panel manufacturer in the world. All the panels that we use in the Philippines are from China. And the opportunity to continue to build out this manufacturing capacity is really important. But with that comes the promotion of the innovative business models, the technology transfer, but more importantly, China's support for project preparation. I think this is what can enable the quality of finance and the quality of outcomes. The other point is that, to bring the cost of capital down. So high interest rates are an issue especially for developing countries. Credit strengthening, long-term financing. These are all really important items that China has delivered in the past through their export credit agencies. They have delivered this through their policy banks. And so now it's a matter of doing a technology switch into renewable energy.
All right, Mr. Tumiwa, what do you think?
Well, yes, we've been working with that, and we see that there's more companies willing to invest in clean energy, renewable energy. So the technology transfer is very, 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 very important, and I think the manufacturing also it's very key. Take as example a solar in the solar power, right? That mostly it has to import from China, but that's also makes it quite difficult for some country, right? Because it's they have to ensure again the energy security. Solar will be commodity in the near future. Solar panel will be the commodity like oil today because high demand. So there is a need and urgency for the country in the ASEAN also to build manufacturing capability with the in partnership with China company. We have seen that country like Malaysia and Vietnam, where Chinese set up factory and using local resources also to produce solar panel to supply domestic market. We can see that also happen in other country in ASEAN, also to support the growing market in ASEAN in terms of that technology. It's not only solar PV, I think also there's a potential of wind power. We know that Chinese manufacturers are also one of the best in the world. So in partnership in producing wind turbine in some country in ASEAN also good, and also storage, battery storage, which also Chinese company leads in terms of the market.
Okay, I want to bring in Zhang Jianyu, Executive Director of the BRI Green Development Institute in Beijing. Director Zhang, so good to have you with us. Let's talk about the impact of the Ukraine crisis on China energy-wise. We know that Russia is China's second largest supplier of crude oil, right after Saudi Arabia. So how do you see the impact? And especially if the war drags on, what will be, the further implications?
Well, I think the impact certainly is significant. I think it could be as large as to push China to rethink about its entire energy portfolio. One event that worth noticing is most recently that Executive Vice Premier Han Zheng held a meeting to emphasize the extreme importance of energy security in China. But China is also committed to the long-term carbon peaking and carbon neutrality. So I think the government is making its best effort trying to figure out how to maximize and to find the best alternatives and options, within all this newly sort of founded circumstance. And I think one thing is really important for China is to, both to base on its own, energy characteristics, and but also really trying to make an effort to find independence of its own energy supply in this new sort of geopolitical situation.
Director Zhang, China's senior leadership also said that it wants the country to secure its energy supply and expand, quote unquote, its circle of friends. Who could be those friends?
Well, I think it should be both the supply and demand side, right? I mean, certainly the friends will include China to diversify its supply, to find whichever the supply it can have, but also on the demand side, that to strengthen its cooperation with our ASEAN friends, because I think the more globalized it can be, then the more secure will be, and I think that's always been the main message that was uttered from the senior leaders from the Chinese government.
Right, old saying goes that man proposes, God disposes, but these days it seems to be that man proposes and geopolitics disposes, like it or not. China is being criticized by many in the West as trying to increase its influence in the ASEAN region with joint projects such as BRI. Some even said that the BRI and the RCEP, the world's largest trade deal, are quote-unquote China's geopolitical victory to write rules. Mr. Zhang, do you look at it that way?
Not really. I think there is this theoretical sort of analysis of the geopolitical situation, which is so-called the Kindberg Trap, that rising nations need to provide public good to the world so as to secure global peace and a peaceful cooperation. And I think what China is really trying to do, and looking at all the past powers of their trajectory, and saying that not only we need to work with the other countries economically, but also we need to work with them environmentally. And I think that has been featured by President Xi's announcement last September that China will provide low carbon and green energy solutions to the BRI countries, and also China will stop building coal-fired power plants in those countries, and that was further emphasized by what's called the opinions the Green BRI that was jointly issued by 4 ministries just 1 week ago, which emphasized on all aspects of environment, energy cooperation with our friends. So I think China is really trying to make a new chapter in this new era of globalization. Yeah. And we don't know, we cannot guarantee its success, but China is definitely making its effort.
All right, fair enough. Mr. Tumiwa, people have been talking about the gas pipeline deal between Russia and Germany. What about a trans-ASEAN gas pipeline, if you think about it? You know, it is one of ASEAN's priority areas for cooperation. People have been talking about it for years, but so far there are only bilateral pipelines between ASEAN members, and amongst them, what's preventing the formation of a, let's say, regional gas pipeline or gas network?
Well, first, I think the building that's large infrastructures requires is very challenging and requires huge capitals. That first. The second, also because this is trans-ASEAN gas pipeline that we've been discussing that for almost 2 decades, I think, it's also requires the harmonizations of planning for each country, and this is what is not easy for ASEAN countries, right? Because gas demand balance is also part of that equation. The third is that you see, I think with this energy transition, there's a question: is how this the demand for gas looks like for each country. We know that there is at the end it is about market to decide whether they will need this gas or not, and we know from the gas development point of view, securing demand is very, very important to develop the supply, because gas is only the infrastructure, but the important thing is actually the supply itself, and we have seen that in many gas projects in Southeast Asia. So it's not easy, and once there is a demand for a new gas field, then it will they will send that gas to the buyers, right? So that left this trans-ASEAN gas pipeline actually having trouble in development.
Right. Ms. Ahmed, on the other hand, you wrote in your article that China can, must, and shall do more to enable and accelerate Southeast Asia's energy transition. Why are you inviting more Chinese engagement despite the criticism and fear by the West of China's rise?
So as the West lectures the region about the benefits and challenges of the transition that Southeast Asia is very much aware of, China faces this historic choice of actually enabling the economy-wide transition. I think in terms of the BRI and the RCEP, for example, it has the opportunity to decisively strengthen the technology partnerships and form climate-centered investment and trade, including technology transfer and the business models. And this is part of the climate prosperity plans of climate vulnerable countries, that China has the technology, the financing, the scale to deliver. And so when thinking about creating markets, and this is really what China's role could be, to mobilize and crowd in market participants, investors that can bring urgency, scale, and quality of investment. And when it comes to this discussion on gas, we already know, and what we see in Europe is doubling down on fossil fuel is the most expensive option, especially when there is lower cost renewable energy that can provide stability to the region and thus propel more different types of investments across different sectors, manufacturing and other opportunities beyond energy.
Right. Mr. Zhang, I want to turn to you because the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has made it very clear that if you want to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, a goal committed to by many countries, the use of coal must be cut by 70% by 2030, and that's not enough. By 2050, we're advised to stop using coal entirely. Do you think that is a feasible goal?
Well, I think definitely we're trying. Actually, talking about the IPCC, they just issued the I think what's called the third working group's report yesterday and re-emphasize again the urgency to peak the emission by 2025 and also to cut our emissions by about 70% by 2050 in order to secure the climate safety for the global citizens. Talking about the topic of coal, I think it's really important for us to really make the best effort to explore the possibility of the cooperation of the manufacturing, which is a solution I see to change the game from our individual natural reserves of the energy issues to the renewable, so that we change the whole game from whether you have energy or not on your land to how much energy you can provide, i.e. the renewables, the solar panels, the wind. And I think that aspect, China has had lots of experience and capacity to work with our ASEAN countries, friends, to really change the equation of the game.
Director Zhang, let's not forget a transition into green energy also requires a transition of the workforce, right? Millions of people work in the coal industry worldwide as we speak. How to retrain, relocate, and perhaps rescale them?
Yeah, no, I think that definitely is a huge challenge in this whole, it's called the just transition movement, that people really start to recognize that, people there working the coal mines, they don't have any fault. I mean, they've been working very hard there, for generations and provide the energy that we need. It's just because the whole world has changed. And we really need to bring them into our equation of the whole scheme of the energy transition. And again, I think China is making many experiments in those regions, trying to figure out the best way how to bring those workforces so that they will not be disposed, as what you just said. And I think those experiences should also be shared with our ASEAN friends so that the whole global just transition can be achieved.
Okay, Ms. Ahmed, do I have questions for one more question? Sorry about that. I really want to ask you about this. The ASEAN gender outlook says while the rest of the world is gearing towards clean energy, women lack access to it, actually. How to understand that assessment?
Well, I think...
So,
Ms. Ahmed, sorry.
Sorry.
Ms. Ahmed, please go ahead.
yes, thank you for that question. So this is where we need to be designing business models and financing to fix this gender disparity when it comes to energy access. A lot of the cooking, for example, is done by traditional burning of wood or other types of materials. And now this is where clean cooking stoves, electric stoves, for example, these are all technology opportunities that China has that could be delivered to a lot of the ASEAN, and that could fix this gender disparity. The other point is that when it comes to this transition and the benefits to be gained by this transition, we can fix a lot of the socioeconomic deficits that we had of the past with a renewable energy powered future.
All right, I want to thank everyone for joining us at this hour. Thank you so much for your input. We learned a lot. And that will do it for this edition of The Hub on CGTN. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. Our news coverage continues. Bye and take care.